Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Cassia, for introducing me. Thanks for inviting me to present to the webinar. And as you said, my name is Clement Jonquet. I'm a researcher at the INRAE Institute in France, and we are in a team called MISTEA, and the group is doing mathematics, statistics, and informatics applied to agri-food domain. And in the informatics department, we are interested in knowledge engineering, ontologies, and especially the use of ontologies. And for a long time, I've been evolving in that area of research, and over the last 4 years, I've been interested in being able to demonstrate with the importance of the FAIRe movement that ontologies, vocabularies, semantic resource in general will be respecting how much they respect the FAIRe principle, and so we move toward implementing a methodology and tool for that we call OFAIRe, for the Ontology FAIRness Evaluator, and that I'm going to present in this presentation. The end of the title is in the AgroPortal semantic resource repository, because I'm actually working on a platform called AgroPortal for several years, in which we store, serve ontologies and semantic resource in the agri-food domain. So that's why the reason also now I'm working at INRAE to push for the adoption of semantics in this context. And this work has been done with Emna Amdouni, a postdoc in my group, and Sifax Boisouni, the main developer on AgroPortal. And the context was in the context of the FUSIN and D2CAP project that are being funded by the National Research Agency in France. Here we are, everyone's going to be happy. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Okay, here we are. So one of my motto over the last 3-4 years is that ontology repositories help to make ontologies fair. So I'm not gonna tell you the story about the FAIRe principle, but it's been a few years that we are trying to demonstrate that the fact of putting ontologies in ontology repositories. When I say ontology, I mean semantic resource in general, something that can fit in an ontology repository, or something that can be expressed with a formal language like RDF or SCOS. So the screenshot that you see here under findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, they come from AgroPortal, that ontology repository that we developed in my group to host and serve ontologies repositories. So we demonstrate that they are more accessible because they are on this server. They are more interoperable one another because they are aligned. We can represent the metadata to show how they are connected one another, and they are more reusable because we provide information on their license, how to reuse them, etc. Well, the FAIRe principle have clearly made the point that vocabularies, they use the term vocabularies in the FAIRe principles, have themselves to follow the FAIRe principle. So that's overall our motivation. When the adoption of the FAIRe movement, everyone noticed that in order to produce FAIRe data, you need FAIRe vocabularies. So how do you measure the fairness of vocabularies in order to in order to help in FAIRe data? So that's been our question, or to go from the principles that are like generic to some specific principles or some specific aspect that we should be able to apply to ontologies and semantic resource in general. So, well, a key feature in that movement is the notion of fairness assessment that was firstly introduced with that paper from the same group that has produced some of the same group that have produced the FAIRe principle. The FAIRe matrix paper kind of starts saying, look, if we want to argue on the fact that something needs to be fair, we're going to need metrics to measure that. We're going to need metrics, and those measures will help us to do if something is actually fair or not fair based on those metrics. And so we had in mind of building a methodology, and that methodology will also become a tool to automatically assess the level of fairness of a semantic resource. The idea is really to do that automatically, and a methodology means that we can come and change that methodology, evaluate that will be based on several aspects I'm gonna explain. And the tool means that eventually we'll reach out to a certain moment where we have an implementation for that methodology. Our goal was the target that you see moving here in the AgroPortal user interface. We wanted to use that white space where we could say, look, maybe we can say something about the fairness level of an ontology. And we start thinking about different ways of representing that. That's the diagram you see with the blue arrow. And from the very beginning, the idea was also to base our work on common metadata, on shared metadata, and for that, AgroPortal was also offering a piece of work that I will explain in the next slide. So, well, as a background, we have produced that slide with EMNA called 50 Shades of Fair. And for the last years, you've seen probably a bunch of papers, and over the last 3 years, a bunch of tools to measure fairness assessment with different UI. Each of them were using different ways, like the stars or the colors and things like that. In our state of the art, we review things that I will say are generic, that will apply to any kind of data set, and things that will be more specific to semantic resources or ontologies, I will say. And we identified 4 things for that: the fair is fair principles, the fair is fair recommendation that are produced in the deliverable of the project with the same name. Poveda and all has written 2 papers, and then it becomes FOOPS, a tool to evaluate the level of fairness, in parallel of our work. There have been another work produced by Alejandra Beltran called Tell Simple Rules paper, and the DBpedia Archivo also was there. And we also came back to what exists with respect to semantic resources, but studying was what was done before the FAIR principle. And on this, we identified 3 important pieces of work: the MIRO guidelines, which were guidelines published in 2017, I think, minimum information when reporting an ontology. So this paper will really enforce the importance of things you need to report when you publish an ontology. MOD, a work that I've been involved in following from the very beginning on producing a metadata, a standard for metadata description of ontologies and semantic resources in general, and another initiative called the 5-star for vocabularies. So the formal reference are here. I just put them for reference, but what's important is the acronym at the beginning of the reference. Those are the names of and the formal reference of each of the approach we have been inspired from, and that we have reused to kind of get inspired in our methodology. So what we did is we took those 6 methodologies or approach, and 2 of them were generic, 4 of them were specific for ontologies or semantic resources. We put them and produced something that we'll call the Integrated Fairness Assessment Grid, which was kind of our first requirement. Let me explain that. So in order to be able to say if something is fair, or more than fair, or less than fair, we'll need a grid, metrics that will tell us where to position that. And to get that quantitative grid that will tell us, look, this is quantified now, and you can say if it's fair or not, then we reuse the 5-6 approach that I mentioned before, and use a baseline, and then introduce each of the importance of those approach into an integrated grid that is described at the bottom of the slide here. For example, if you look at the first fair principle F1, SHARC and FDMM for the fair data maturity model, which is a recommendation from one of RDA working group. SHARC is also another one. So they will give a lot of importance to F1. You see 12 points and 8 points, or we transform that into points, but less importance to other aspects. And the same with the other approach that are ontology specific. So you see that Poveda and all will give importance to certain aspects, MIRO also, but some of them will be completely ignored, the accessibility ones, for example. And so we introduce all of that, considering a baseline of 10 credits, let's say, for each of the principle, and then the fusion with the other things gave us a prism, a grid that we could reuse to evaluate to dispatch points, credits on fairness when doing fairness assessment. So in doing this, we were already inspired by the fact that even if the FAIR principles were originally defined, 15 of them without any difference, then we found out that the community and the approach have given more importance to some of the principle in doing fairness assessment. And so we wanted to keep that in mind. So basically that grid gave us 478 credits that will be able to dispatch, that are dispatched on the 15 principles. And for us, that will be the baseline for for computing for measuring the level of fairness. So with 470 points, now 78 points, now we are able to say, oh, where does it start to say, where we can say that the resource is fair or fairer, more fair than fair, or maybe not fair. That's a dangerous work to kind of argue on that, but we tried using a measurement to say, look, if we can fix some kind of a threshold between 240 credits and 451 credits, that will basically tell us that you are around fair, and if you're above that, you're more than fair, and if you're less than that, you're not really fair. Well, you don't need that. We did the job of proposing that. It's explained in one paper called Fair or Fairer, an integrated quantitative fairness assessment grid for semantic resource and ontologies. But that's not mandatory. Once you have a matrix, you already have a way to measure something. You don't need to say, oh, certain level you're fair, under a certain level you're not fair. Typically, other approach have not always done that. So then from there, our second requirement was really to do a projection of the FAIR principle, the 15 FAIR principle, as we can see in the literature, for the semantic resources. And when I mean semantic resources, I mean vocabularies, ontologies, terminologies, thesauri, all those aspects, all those resources, semantic artifact also, we use the term we use also now to englobe all of them. So, we come up with 61 questions that will be criteria. Is an ontology or a resource respect these and these and these? Then it will make one question, and then etc. up to 61 questions that we have projected for each of the FAIR principles. And of all the 61 questions, 45 of them are really dependent on the semantic resources, and 16 of them are kind of independent on the ontology or the semantic resource, and will depend on, for example, the ontology repository or the repository or the database on which it's stored. So for example, if I give you an example of one of the principle, the findable number F4 principle Q question number 2 is the ontology register in multiple open ontology repositories. If you have elements to answer these questions, then you will get 10 credits. If you go to R1.1, the first question, for example, is the ontology license clearly specified with an URI that is resolvable and support content negotiation. So you see that our questions are sometimes progressive. So if it's clearly specified, you will get 5 points. If it's a URI, you'll get 10 points. If it's a URI that supports content negotiations, you'll get 15 points. We are trying to do these kind of things. On these, of course, on the dispatch of the credits on the questions, we are a little bit subjective, but we try to do our best in doing this job. And the idea is that the methodology can be also readjusted afterward without changing the whole grid that I've presented before. So once we have that projections, then we were able to implement a score system that for each question will do the sum to provide us a principal score, and from those principal score we will get a fair score that will even be able to normalize between 0 and 100, for example, for better clarity. Then the third requirement that we had in our work was we'll need a unified way to describe the semantic resource metadata. Well, most of the questions are based on a metadata property that tells us something about the ontology or the semantic resource, and so we wanted to be sure that we were going to need a way to encode that metadata. So, for example, if I go back to the question on the license, then we need a metadata property to encode the license, and that metadata property should be formally described in order for a machine to find it, and possibly have this value being a URI that is resolvable. For this, we rely on MOD. MOD is a specification that was published in 2017. The version 1.4, 1.2 was published, and then 1.4 became more standard. It's a set of 127 properties that are usable, identified and listed with mapping, with crosswalk to other properties, overall, we have reviewed something like 346 properties in different semantic web metadata vocabularies. And MOD will give us the property in which we can encode an information for an ontology, and once we have a property to encode that, then we'll be able to use that to evaluate the level of fairness. So typically, for example, if we have a fairness a question that is about, I don't know, the relation between ontologies and the fact that an ontology is aligned to another one, then we will store that in a metadata level. If we have a metadata field that tells us that ontology A is aligned to ontology B, then ontology A will have that metadata, and that will be used for the fairness assessment. So yeah, 346 was the numbers of properties that we revise and review in MOD. And we also work with the ontology repositories, something like 5 or 7, I don't remember, ontology or vocabulary service, and the metadata that they were representing for a semantic resource in their application. So, well, we end up with OFAIRe, which is 80% resource metadata based, so based on the metadata. And here you have examples of the metadata property that we will use to answer specific questions. Here are other ones coming from different vocabularies. So if you're familiar with OMV, DCAT, MOD itself, but also VOF, all of those are vocabularies that we have reused that were already introduced in MOD. Then finally, our requirement number 4 to realize an implementation of all of that was to find a place where the descriptions of ontology will be harmonized and curated by editors or curators, so that we'll be able to offer an evaluation of the fairness of resources. We kind of tried before doing that to go directly in the ontologies and look inside the ontology metadata properties, but we've published a study in this paper that I'm mentioning here, 805 ontologies, on which we find out that there is almost no metadata properties in most of them. So if you want to do fairness assessment based on metadata, you need to go to a place where metadata is captured and curated, because the ontology themselves, they don't offer enough metadata to actually offer a score that will be relevant. And so AgroPortal was the perfect platform for that. 2 years ago, I mean, in 2018, 4 years ago, we published a paper called Harnessing the Power of Unified Metadata in an Ontology Repository, the case of AgroPortal. The idea was there to implement something that was similar to MOD 1.4. That would be a unified model when you will get a bunch of metadata arriving from different ontologies and harmonize them in a unique model. And once you have this unique model, you can do statistics out of it, you can do metrics, you can do measurement, you can do fairness assessment. Well, OFAIRe is the results that we've been able to produce in the context of this work. As I said, it's a methodology which uses as much as possible the assigned metadata values to ensure a series of questions that are specialized for semantic resources. And it's also a tool that has been implemented, so that methodology has been implemented as a web service that will work with AgroPortal, but also with any OntoPortal installation that will respect the MOD 1.4 metadata profile to describe its metadata. What I mean by that is that if you have an OntoPortal, for those who don't know, is the technology that BioPortal has produced that we reuse in AgroPortal, and that can be reused by different ontology repositories to offer ontology repository. That can be reused by different organizations, to offer and develop ontology repositories. So assuming you have the metadata, then OFAIRe works on your OntoPortal installation. If you don't, we could find a way to implement OFAIRe in a tool that will consume the metadata from another source, but that will require a little bit of more work. And then the UI that you see here is an illustration of the results in AgroPortal. We are able to show you the scores. Here we are showing on the web page, on the AgroPortal welcome page, the fairness assessment of all the resources in AgroPortal. So here we are doing some kind of an average, and you see that the average score of all the resources in AgroPortal is 285, which brings us to a 59% when it's normalized. And you see some of the FAIR principles that are well addressed by the ontologies in the portal. around F2, F3, also the one in accessibility. Those ones are strong, also strongly addressed because they are helped by the ontology repository. They do not always depend only on the ontologies. And then you see that we have margin of progression in reusability and in interoperability. With a good sign on R1.1. R1.1 is the principle related to the licensing. So licenses are usually quite well described in AgroPortal for ontologies. And the UI you see on your right shows you with a scroll bar the score that has been obtained for one ontology or for a certain group. I will demonstrate with other UIs in the next slides. But you also see the score that haven't been obtained in yellow, and in gray is the score that whatever you will do, you will not get it because it's not implemented yet. It's where we need to improve the implementation of OFAIRe inside AgroPortal. Either we miss a metadata property to encode an information that we have put in the methodology because we wanted the methodology to be agnostic. And so we need to improve the implementation of OFAIRe in AgroPortal for people to be able to harmonize and capture these points. Sorry, I have noise in the back here. Forget about it.
Sorry, Clement, you are muted.
Hey, sorry, I'm muted by mistake. Sorry. Those are screenshots of the OFAIRe implementation in AgroPortal. So the one on the left shows you how you will get a certain fairness score for a given ontology. So that's exactly the same kind of UI that I show you for a group. Here we have one of the best ontology in AgroPortal with a score of 71%. I think it's the Agronomy ontology. Then you have in the middle an illustration of the explanation you will get for each of the fairness assessment question that we have produced, the 61 question. So for each question, you will see the question, the possible credit that you can get for this question, but also the metadata field when it's a metadata field that has been used, the metadata field that has been used, and the value of that metadata field. So for example, for the question, does the ontology have a local identifier, a globally unique and potentially permanent identifier assigned by the developer, typically a URI, then we'll look into the ontology, and if the URI is here, and if it's resolvable, well-formed, etc., we'll give a certain numbers of points, here 9. And on the right, you see a UI that shows the fairness score of a group of ontology, which is similar to the one that I've illustrated on the page before. That one will help you to pick up several ontologies in AgroPortal and see the average values of fairness score for those groups. So this is typically very useful for developers or groups working on several ontologies. So the fair score for a given methodology will give you the explanation, the total fair score, the normalized score, an access of the detail in JSON, so you can actually plug that in another system if you want to have a certain UI, another UI or another tool using another UI or another tool using that. And then the explanation that I've illustrated here, you can click and check and see, for example, on the F1Q1, the question that I was illustrating, then you see if there is no URI, you have no points. If there is a URI, but it happens that it's invalid, you have 3 points. If it's a URI that happens to be valid, you have 9 points. And there is another question somewhere where we evaluate the fact that it's resolvable. And that's the illustration for the score that I've also mentioned a bit. Those were the zoom on the illustration before. Just wanted to mention that behind OFAIRe, there is a web service that returns a JSON result. And that JSON result helps you to embed the service itself in different application. So in summary, OFAIRe has been released over last February, so it's going to be soon. It's going to be a year. A web service is available directly at services.agroportal.liam.fr. That web service is a Java application that can be run in any Tomcat installation somewhere. And the fairness assessment methodology behind is based on 61 questions that I've mentioned. It output a fair score for an ontology or a group of ontologies. The code is open source, of course. And we have deployed OFAIRe on different installation of OntoPortal. I have illustrated with AgroPortal, but it also works with another instance called the Cypher Bioportal, or the industry portal that has been developed also by our colleagues in a project called OntoCommons. And we do have a paper that is going to be published on OFAIRe that will be published in Metadata, Semantics, and Ontology journal. On these, just wanted to mention the publication out of this, the ESWC paper, and now the OFAIRe makes you an offer. That will be the journal paper describing the whole methodology with all of the question and all of the explanation for each of the question. This is a 30 or 35 double column page paper, so it's super well describing the content of the methodology. As a conclusion, I will say that we have built an approach that is built from other methods and contribution in the FAIRe ecosystem. But that is much more complete in terms of aspect covered. I mean, we haven't compared here in this presentation, but we go in more details than most of the other approach, at least the one that are specified for ontologies or semantic artifact. And we only compare to another tool that is produced by University Polytechnic in Madrid called FOOPS, because those are the only two tools available. We have produced also behind that a generic methodology with a reference evaluation grid that can be reused, that can be changed in different scenarios, that is customizable, means that you can add a question and just revise the dispatch of the numbers of credits on all the questions without rethinking the whole methodology and the whole application. The web service works on OntoPortal ontology repositories, and 51 of the 61 questions are really implemented there. Well, overall, the idea is to facilitate the identification and selection of ontologies, that overall motivation being able to assess the level of fairness. And I conclude on fairer ontologies because we have already measured that in AgroPortal, since we have released OFAIRe and inform our users of that, we've seen the level of fairness of ontologies increase in the portal. And we have even run an agro-hackathon, fairness assessment agro-hackathon, where people came and work on that. That was kind of exciting. On this, that was my last slide. I hope I was not too long. And yeah.